Okay, you people want builds? Let's go ahead and talk some builds. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Unicorn Overlord.
Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, my coverage of Unicorn Overlord, other strategy RPGs, or the gaming sphere in general, a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Also, since we're talking units and the individual soldiers in those units, if you would like to have a custom soldier for the campaign when March 8th comes around and Unicorn Overlord drops for its full release, check out my link to my Patreon in the description down below. Thank you very much. There has been an insane amount of clamor ever since the demo for Unicorn Overlord dropped about the just endless possibilities when it comes to individual builds for characters and soldiers, and then putting those characters and soldiers together into just insane slaying machine units. And I wanted to get in and show a few of the builds that actually worked out the best for me in my time with the demo. I've done 2 complete runs thus far, and I'm working on a 3rd, and I wanted to show off 3 builds today that I'm particularly fond of. Note that I've not absolutely min-maxed the demo yet. I know that you can get to a point where you can have 4 characters in a unit, and of course that's going to equal more power, but I didn't get to that point, and I think that's fine, because the goal of today's video is to show off some of the quick and easy builds that you can start to get online very early in the game, and give you ideas about how that might wind up spiraling into true tactical madness by the time you get to the mid to late game. So, without further ado, let's talk about those 3 builds. Also, you'll notice my button prompts going back and forth between my PlayStation controller and my Switch controller, because some of these builds are on the Switch version, some are on the PS5 version. Okay, onward. 2 things I want to emphasize before we get into the builds themselves here as well are the fact that these are not optimized. Okay, these are not things that I've sat and ground out items for and perfected every little tactic, gotten maximized squads for what you can achieve in the demo, anything like that. The goal is to give you all an idea of what you can start to achieve with a little bit of thought and a couple of interesting items. I want to give you all some inspiration to make your own big units, squads, and have your own fun with the game in the way that you're going to. I want to highlight what you can do, not necessarily what you should do. Although we will do some build videos down the line where I show you some really kick-ass stuff when we have the opportunity. The other thing that I want to emphasize is when building a unit, the best thing you can do for yourself, especially early in the game when you don't have very large squads, 2, 3, maybe 4 units, is to pick a particular unit type or strategy to build around. And that's what you're going to be seeing in the 3 builds that we talk about today. We've got 1 soldier that's supposed to do a particular type of thing, and then the rest of the soldiers in the unit are supporting, emphasizing, or even completely facilitating that thing. You'll see what I'm talking about as we go through them here, and we're going to start with what I call the Gyaru Griffin squad, led by Francois, whose name I know I don't pronounce right. I'm trying. It's just hard to learn pronunciation from chat as chat's flying by, and also I can't hear how it's said. I just have to interpret it. So, Gyaru Griffin, what is the goal here? The goal is to maximize on the interesting and unique combat capabilities of Griffin Knights to try and clear large swaths of enemy units as quickly as possible while keeping your Griffin Knight alive. To do that, let's look at Francois herself, because of course she is the focus here. We have a very basic Recruit's hand axe on her, partially because I just didn't get my hands on a better axe for her, and partially because she just doesn't really need something better at the moment with the way her support is set up, which we'll talk about in a moment. Gives her some extra HP, gives her some extra XP as you're grinding through the campaign. Nothing wrong with that. Anything better that you can give her will be perfectly fine. The main idea, though, is you want to make use of the Griffin Knight's natural high swing ability. So an axe that is good, but part of its kit is it gives you a different ability. Not necessarily what you want to go for, unless you find something that can be situationally synergistic with the build. But for this early idea, not necessary. We then have a lucky coin, increasing our critical rate by 20% and our evasion by 20. The goal of this build is to have your Griffin Knight hit as hard as possible. Some extra crit rate to make sure that that happens is great. And also, she's the primary dodge tank. She's the primary tank of the build in general. She's in the front line, and things are going to be targeting her the most. So having even more evasion on top of the Knights of good base evasion, especially against melee units, very solid. Finally, we have the Vitality Talisman, just to give us a little bit of extra HP for this attacks that do sneak through, hit decently hard because Griffin Knights do not have the best physical defense in particular, and give her a little bit more of an opportunity to survive and heal up with Wing Rest, her ability that gives her her own healing. We'll talk about that in a moment. As far as our abilities are concerned, we're using High Swing with 2 variations of it, and the reason we have 2 variations of it and why you'll see variations of the same skill across all of these builds is to fulfill certain conditions. Because basically, the character will look at the top left, say, okay, High Swing, priority number 1, row with most combatants. Cool. If for some reason there's not a row with the most combatants, maybe there's one in the front and one in the back, and that's it, then we can go to High Swing 2, target the lowest HP, execute something. Lowest HP is always a very solid baseline to have as a condition for any given attack ability, just so you can try and make sure that units don't sneak away with 1 HP, and you can actually finish off squads a little bit more efficiently and preserve your stamina. Finally, we do have Wing Rest to restore our own HP, recover 25% HP, doubled if afflicted. This is great because there's no healing in this squad other than some potential self-healing, and you would like your tank to be able to provide some of her own healing. The nice thing about High Swing is you're just going to be able to cleave through a row of enemies whenever and wherever you want. Cavalry targets can't guard against it, they take extra damage, but just as an axe unit, you're hitting pretty damn hard. So all but the most resilient of targets are going to take a lot of damage from this attack, and if you can hit up to 3 things at once, that's awesome. Now, of course, you might be saying, well, yeah, but what about resilient targets like hoplites and things like that? What are we supposed to do about those? Well, that's where our support comes in, with Witch Yana. Yana is set up with an interesting little array of abilities. First off, she has the Chiropteran Staff that she joins with. Gives +5 to Evasion and +3 to Initiative. No other special abilities, but that's fine. She doesn't need them. Primarily, I like this staff on her because of the initiative that it grants, which allows her to start setting up the attacks for the rest of the squad. Then she has a Leather Hood to increase her magical attack. Nothing wrong with that. She's going to be hitting things with Ice Bolt. Does magical damage. More damage is good. The most important piece of this set of gear is the Dove Plume, which gives another Initiative +10. We want this because we want to be able to Ice Bolt a dangerous target right off the bat to make things a little bit safer for our Griffin Knight. Again, she's a dodge tank, not a traditional tank, so if an attack does manage to get through and hit her, it could be pretty bad pretty fast. With Ice Bolt, we can try to make sure that that doesn't happen. Let's talk about our tactics for it. Our first iteration of 3 prioritizes the back row and the unit with the most AP in the back row. The idea here being you can find something that is either hasn't attacked yet, potentially going to try to attack, or, God forbid, has multiple AP, and freeze it so that it can't get any attacks off before you're able to potentially cleave it in half with your Griffin Knight. Failing any units in the back row or a unit with the most AP will default to targeting an armored unit because we'll deal good damage to them, freeze them, prevent them from guarding, never a bad thing. And then if all else fails, we can try to execute an enemy with a lowest HP Ice Bolt. Now, the most important part, and the reason that this whole build kind of ticks, is the Magic Conferral skill that makes witches very, very strong. This activates before an ally's physical attack. It adds magic damage to an ally's next attack of 50 potency, and we have it set to prioritize our flying unit. The idea here is we can add magic damage to our attack, and suddenly those enemies with high physical defense, like fighters, hoplites, other targets, suddenly not so resilient against our gigantic axe-swinging lunatic. With this, you can easily have a high swing, cleave through all 3 units, and finish them off. And with the added benefit of the fact that high swing is considered a ranged attack, so it can target the front row or the back row. Take out a bunch of soldiers that are trying to chain heal at the end of fights, easy. Take out a backline knight that's hard to hit but is going to be guarding the front line to make it even harder to get to the knight and make things hard to take down, easy. This does a remarkable amount of damage, even just with the regular recruit's hand axe, and it is the #1 reason why this build ticks. Now, of course, we do need some extra defense, as no matter how high your evasion is, if an enemy can get a guaranteed hit on you, like a ranger, your Griffin Knight will pop real fast. That's where our fighter comes in. Fighters are an interesting class, and we're going to be talking about them in general when I start doing my actual unit breakdown guides and talking about what's good, what's not, how to build them, all that type of fun stuff. But fighters are getting talked about a lot as generally being one of the weaker classes in the game. However, I think that what people are missing is that they're very versatile. They're a great body to put good equipment on because their natural skill set is not the most useful but has some situational use. They're a very good option to be able to put something like, say, the Viper Fang sword on to give them a useful new attack that you might not otherwise want to use on something like a thief, who you generally want to be using their PP steel attack. So, what does Renee set up to do here? Well, as mentioned, he has the Viper Fang. I like this as it allows your squad to have a lot more damage output than it otherwise might from this kind of defensive, tanky fighter unit by poisoning big enemies and making them tick down with a lot of damage whenever they try to use their next ability. It does the same amount of damage as the fighter's warding slash, and unfortunately, Renee is not going to be moving before a lot of other units because fighters are fairly slow. So trying to get a hit in with warding slash to boost your defense when there's not many enemies that are going to be throwing attacks around at that point anyway, not the most useful thing. With this, we can actually do something a lot more interesting. Then he has a basic bronze shield. It's really all he needs. I would, of course, upgrade this, but at this early point in the demo, I didn't really have anything on hand, and it turns out didn't really need it either, which is pretty nice. Finally, we have the Guardian Gloves, a very interesting item that I want to figure out better use of, but essentially what they do is they give you plus 10% to your guard rate, not bad at all, some extra physical defense, I'll take it, but most importantly, the guarding fighter's skill. It activates after guarding an attack, and it grants the user plus 20% physical attack and plus 30% critical damage. So, in situations where things are hitting your backline, Renee, your fighter, or whatever fighter you happen to be using, blocks the attack, because they're slow, now they've got to boost their physical attack and their critical damage. They come out swinging with that Viper Fang, hit real hard, lay some poison on someone, and really make them think about what it was they're doing with their lives. As far as our tactics setup, we have the following. 2 iterations of Poison Slash. The first one prioritizing armored units, so that way if, maybe your magical attack doesn't quite bring them down or something along those lines, you can hit them with the poison, hopefully finish them off that way, even if the initial attack maybe doesn't do as much damage because they're high physical defense. And then failing there to be any armored units, we have a second iteration of Poison Slash that just targets the lowest HP enemy. Again, try and finish them off either with the poison or the attack itself. Sorry for the quick cut. I had to actually switch the arrangement of arrow cover and guarding fighter. I forgot where this save was at the point in the demo that I loaded it from. The tactic wasn't actually saved from how I'd been using it during the course of the game, so I had to swap these around. Arrow cover is our #1 priority. We're prioritizing flying because, again, the whole reason we have a fighter here is to jump in the way of an arrow shot that might otherwise one-shot our Griffin Knight, who we need to make sure stays alive. This is the #1 priority. If there's an archer on the field, I want this to be happening. Now, that said, if there's not an archer on the field, that's where guarding fighter can come in. Situationally, Renee blocks an attack, reduces the damage that he takes, buffs his own damage, comes in swinging for the counter hit. Great. Never hurts to have some extra damage, and there's going to be weird unit formations where you can't just wipe things out with a big cleave of your axe. You're going to need better single target damage to blow up priority targets, enemies that might otherwise not get hit. That's where guarding fighter can come in and help you do just that. I love this squad. It's one of my most effective squads by far in the course of my time with the PS5 demo. I can just clear enemy units like no tomorrow. And you don't take that much damage if you wind up taking out 50%, 75% of the enemy squad with your first attack, right? Now, we're not the fastest. There are times where we will get out initiatived, but that's where Yana can come in to try and neutralize enemies that are going to be doing that. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, I actually kind of want to add a different condition. Rather than prioritizing the enemy with the most AP, it could actually be good. This will require experimentation, but it could be good to target an enemy with the highest initiative instead, because she should be able to outspeed most things, and then we can neutralize a target that might otherwise get some dangerous attacks off on our Griffin Knight or our fighter. Something to play around with. This is where the tactics system can get really interesting really fast, because that one change could dramatically impact the way that a battle unfolds, but something to play with. But that's the idea here. Neutralize a fast, dangerous enemy, get your Griffin Knight buffed, have your fighter on standby to tank any attacks that she might take from arrows, have her fly in, swing hard, crush a bunch of dudes, and then Yana and Renee maybe can finish some things off depending on the way the battle proceeded. Love it. Very effective, and I can't wait to see when I absolutely use this build in the full campaign what other optimizations I can make with some better gear. Next up, we have Berenice's squad with one of the most glass cannon assault builds that I've put together in this game thus far, and something that I thought was going to be an absolute meme and quickly turned into one of my favorite builds that I've done. The idea here is that Berenice the Sellsword can deal a lot of damage very quickly due to her high damage heavy slash, as well as the fact that she can use attacks like following slash to hit enemies that then attack us. The follow-up, once she's cleared out a lot of damage on the enemy, will be her powerful call, granting a 30% physical attack boost to one of our cavaliers, one of our knights here, who will then charge in and start cleaning up enemies that have the lowest HP and getting their attack back to keep doing it over and over until hopefully the squad is gone, which happens more often than not. So of course, what do we have on Berenice here? We have the Hallowed Blade, which allows her to heal 10% HP when using an active skill and gives her +5 max HP. This is great because she really, more than any of the other members of the squad, needs to survive to set up those future kills or the whole thing falls apart. So having a little bit of extra HP and the ability to heal herself a little bit, since there are no other healers in the squad, is very nice. We then have the Lapis Pendant, giving us a base PP of +1, allowing us to use both of our support abilities, very important. And the Dancer's Bracelet itself, which gives us the Powerful Call ability, which, again, grants that 30% physical attack increase. As far as our tactics are concerned, we have the normal Sellsword Heavy Slash, big physical damage to set up a weakened enemy, targeting the highest HP enemy to achieve maximum efficiency on that attack. Powerful Call for when one of our knights decides to ride out and deal damage, gives them a nice physical attack boost that might even allow them to finish off a squishier enemy without needing it to be set up first, getting the whole rollover of AP, chaining attacks together thing going. And then a couple iterations of Following Slash. This is a little bit experimental as I'm trying to figure out how often you can actually trigger Following Slash. It seems like it should be fairly often. The first iteration set up to target the highest HP enemy, counterattack a single enemy, and grants the user +1 to PP if the attack hits. The idea then is if you still have PP left from Following Slash, granting it back to you, if another enemy attacks, then you can follow up once again with another Following Slash, targeting the lowest HP enemy to try and execute something. I'm not 100% sure if this works the way that I'm thinking that it works. There might be some unseen conditions where you can only trigger something like this once per unit, but I think it bears experimenting, and it never hurts to have 2 iterations of this in here. Is at the end of the day, the worst thing that happens is if only one's going to activate, only one is going to activate. No big deal, whatever. Looking at our knights, we have Jamel, who is set up with a Templar's Spear, a Bronze Shield, and a Pursuance Bracelet. The Templar's Spear is just a decently damaging spear that gives some extra physical defense and guard rate. Again, a little bit of an extra boost to help keep these gentlemen alive, because if they go down, the whole thing falls apart. But more often than not, they tend to survive with an HP or 2 for a staggeringly long amount of time. The Bronze Shield is a very simple shield that just helps to guard. A better shield here obviously does not hurt, but again, early days of the demo build and basic gear still works. And then more importantly, the Pursuance Bracelet. This grants the ability Pursuit, which, if you're familiar, is the ability that Joseph has that allows him to follow up allies' attacks for nice damage. The goal with this is to be able to sortie out, kill something with an Assaulting Lance, get your AP back, another ally attacks, whether it be Berenice or the other knight, follow up with a Pursuit, execute a weakened enemy, or maybe just weaken them enough that, again, another Assaulting Lance from Jamel or the other knight will be able to chain into another follow-up attack and keep bouncing back and forth to clear out the entire enemy squad. This extra little bit of damage utilizing your PP really makes it so much more likely that you're going to be able to get that loop going, that it's not uncommon for this squad to one round a total HP enemy unit of like 180 HP. It's pretty nuts. We then do have Quick Guard there if we wind up taking an early hit, just need to block. So it goes. I'd rather make sure that these guys stay alive to keep attempting to chain their attacks together than to necessarily get the guaranteed Pursuit in. So it's here if we happen to get attacked and need to reduce the damage. Swinging over here to Hughes, has a simpler setup, but not by much. Also has the Templar's Spear and the Bronze Shield for the exact same reasons that his brother-in-arms does, but this time has the Silken Scarf, again, in an effort to reduce the amount of damage that he winds up taking. It's not a huge evade buff, knights are not the dodgiest units to begin with, but it helps where it helps, and again, whatever advantage we can get in keeping ourselves alive here is good. Then he does not have a Pursuit ring, so simple as it can be. Assaulting Lance targeting the lowest HP enemy to try and get the execute so you can get your AP back and do it all over again. And then again, Quick Guard to reduce the amount of damage that you take, make yourself a little bit tankier. And again, helps more than you might think. There have been so many times that this squad is running around the battlefield with single-digit HP, maybe not even adding up to double-digit HP if you add all of their total HP together, or all of their remaining HP together, I should say, and yet they're still just crushing because they're quick, they can start setting up chain attacks super easily, and even Berenice being fairly slow as a sellsword doesn't really matter because she starts throwing in following slashes and powerful calls to boost her allies before she even necessarily gets the heavy slash in. It's a very fun build. There's so much that I know you'd be able to do with this. And it's great, too, because, again, as the leader, Berenice provides the squad her high stamina of 6, so you can keep these guys out on the battlefield fighting for a long time before you're forced to give them the chance to rest. I love this build. It clears squad after squad. You've been seeing it on screen. I've got some footage up now. Total blast. Highly recommend that you check out this or something similar, especially once you get a sellsword to level 10, and then you get access to their killing chain, which is literally the exact same thing as the assaulting lance, except it's just the sellsword version of it. So imagine the blender that that'll turn into once she's level 10 as well. It's a total blast. And finally, we have what I'm calling the Pryromaniacs squad, featuring Wizard Auch, Hunter Rolf, and Hoplite Hodrick. This is a setup that is pretty early in the build, and I wanted to highlight one from earlier in the demo, specifically because I wanted to show just how early you can start to get builds like this online. So, what is it here to do? The primary thing to focus on, the primary unit that we're built around, is Auch, and specifically one particular ability that he has. This is his Fire Burst ability coming from the Chlorotic Rod. The Chlorotic is a rod that you get when you recruit Auch during his quest, and it has a very interesting ability on it, which is Fire Burst. It activates at the end of a battle, it attacks a single enemy with magic, but importantly, it hits all enemies if the target is burning, and this is a passive point ability, not an active point ability. What this means is this squad clears really, really hard. We'll go through the whole thing. So, as far as Ausch's equipment is concerned, he has, of course, the Chlorotic Rod. It's a fairly decent rod, primarily here for the Fire Burst ability. Then he has a Silk Hood to increase his magical attack, because we want him to be able to deal as much damage as possible with that Fire Burst attack. And a Silken Scarf, on the off chance that he does get targeted by an attack, he has a greater chance to dodge out of the way, because Auch is a fragile, delicate little man who will crumple at the slightest inclination. The tactics and his abilities are as follows. He starts off with Fireball, targeting the highest HP enemy. This is a pretty high damage attack, and it does inflict burn, so enemies will take even more damage if they start their turn after they get lit on fire. And as such, we want to hit the highest HP enemy in the hopes that they survive long enough to get fire bursted. Next up, we have Magic Counter, targeting one or fewer enemies. The idea here is that you don't need to AoE the squad down if there's only one enemy left. So if there's only one enemy left, they happen to attack Auch, he can just Magic Counter and blow them up, because Magic Counter on its own does deal more single target damage than Fire Burst. This should only trigger in the situation where there's only one enemy unit left, wherein that higher single target damage will be more valuable. Finally, then, of course, we have Fire Burst itself with its condition set to target a burning enemy. Obviously, that's what we want this to do, so we can detonate the entire enemy squad. Simple, effective, to the point, but how is it being supported? Well, that's where we have to talk about Rolf. Rolf the Hunter has an interesting opportunity here as we pick up a Flame Bow in the course of completing Oclesis the Angel's quest. Flame Bow reads as follows. Flame Arrow. Attack a single enemy. Inflicts burn. Simple as. Deals literally the same amount of damage as a hunter's normal attack. It will still crit if you're targeting a flyer. However, it will also get that burn damage over time and set up for the big explosion. Much like with Ausch's Fireball, I have this set to target the highest HP enemy, as again, we don't want to accidentally blow them up too early. And we have our Eagle Eye ability to just make sure that we can hit whatever it is we're targeting. For our equipment, we have, again, the Flame Bow, a Warrior's Medallion to give increased physical damage, because even though it's a fire attack, this is a physical attack, as well as some extra crit rate to pick off dangerous enemies, and a Vitality Talisman to make Rolf a bit tankier, because it's unlikely that he's going to be getting guarded for by Hodrick. Speaking of Hodrick, we'll hit him up now. This Hodrick build is literally as simple as it can possibly get, with one small caveat. If you've played the Unicorn Overlord demo, you know how Hoplites play, you know how Hodrick plays. I don't even have any special gear on him. He just has a Recruit's Short Spear, a Bronze Great Shield, and some gauntlets. Look, the majority of this is stuff that he comes in with. I just bought him a fancier spear so he could get a little bit of extra XP. That's it. It's what he does that's important here. He's got two abilities. Sting, targeting the lowest HP enemy, so that way if something survives the explosion, he can run in and finish him off. And more importantly, Heavy Cover, standard Hoplite ability, but specifically prioritizing casters. So, if, say, a feisty archer or something tries to snipe Auch down before we can trigger the explosion, Hodrick can jump in the way, block it. Actually, I just had the realization, prioritizing caster would not do what we want it to do. We specifically want to just have the condition caster. This way, he will guaranteed only cover Auch rather than accidentally waste to get on Rolf if Rolf is the one who gets attacked because, you know, he's only going to prioritize casters, but he'll still protect someone else if it's not set properly. So make sure you set your conditions properly. We'll go over that in tomorrow's video. And those, my friends, are 3 of my early, very loosely put together, but surprisingly effective unit builds for Unicorn Overlord in its demo. Like I've said a few times throughout the video, these are not super optimized builds. You can do way more just in the demo alone to really maximize some of these strategies. But I wanted to get the juice kind of flowing for you guys, get the gears turning, really give you an idea of what you can start setting up early with just a couple of synergistic abilities. Like, I thought of the Auch squad just when I saw the flame bow. I was like, ah, that's another way for us to set up burning for fire burst. That's interesting. And we just threw something together. Are there better ways to put this squad together? Probably. I haven't had too much time to sit and just tinker with individual unit builds, but you know I'm going to over time. As such, make sure that you pay attention to what gear is being dropped, what gear can be purchased, and what abilities you unlock as you level your units up, because whole new strategies could open up with just one change to your gear, your tactics, or the abilities that you have on hand. Speaking of all the crazy stuff that I know you're able to do, people have been posting a lot of interesting things across the internet in terms of their own units and builds. So, if you have something particularly interesting that you'd like to share with me in the community, drop it in the comments down below. Or, if you'd like it to be seen in a place where it's a little bit easier to discuss, you can always join the Discord and drop it in the Unicorn Overlord channel there. There's been a ton of discussion about secrets, strategies, builds, synergies, all that type of fun stuff. And again, we're just going off what we got in the demo right now. Imagine how it'll be once March 8th comes around and the whole game is out, right? There will be plenty more in-depth videos like this going forward, especially once the game comes out. I have a lot of things that I want to highlight, whether it be mechanical discussion or unit building discussion. Like, as I've mentioned, that tactics video that I should hopefully have out tomorrow if you're watching this on release. With all that said, though, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, and remember, be good to each other. Bye now.